Hi, I'm Chris Breitenbach with Comey & Shepherd Realtors. Let me redirect you to letting go and living more.
Welcome to the Redirect Podcast. We appreciate you joining us and listening to our conversation about finding purpose in retirement. Dale, Adam, we've got a great conversation today about downsizing your living and specifically your home. So I got a question for you guys. Have you ever downsized, Dale? Not meaning a smaller version of you.
mini Dale. That's just happening naturally as I get older, Curt. Your ears go down.
Yeah, spine compresses. I understand it. I used to be 6'1".
I've been
now
downsized. I keep downsizing.
Yeah.
It's his hip hop alter ego, Little Dale.
That's right. I think I lost an inch when I had my hip replacement.
But only on one side.
But only on one side. So you asked why I limp. That's why I limp.
It's got the Detroit lean.
Okay, let's get back on topic. Downsizing a house. Yeah. Have you done that?
So I went through the process of considering, should I stay in the house that I'm in? This was in 2018, well before COVID. My wife and I were looking at, well, maybe we should downsize. Everything that we looked at was more expensive and needed work. We then realized, we've got two boys who are going to have grandkids. Didn't have them then. I would love to have a place where we could all gather at our house, stay at our house. And we kept our home as the next step to be able to be the place where both kids could come over with their kids and we can all stay in the house. So I made a decision, stay in the house, rehab the whole house. Thankfully, just before COVID, because then we had a beautiful, wonderful place that we had created for the next 10, 15 years. Before then, we will downsize. No, I think we'll move into senior community at some point in time. But we went through that process.
How about you? Well, you, Adam, I don't think you've considered or done downsizing unless there were changes in your life due to family structures that may have downsized.
No.
Or maybe you probably upsized.
Yeah, that's probably, if there's a change for us in the next 5 years, it'll be upsizing, actually.
Really?
Yeah,
really?
We live in a pretty modest house. It's just me and my wife, but we have grandkids. We're accumulating grandkids, and it's wonderful, but we need a little more space for all of that, and that's probably more where our future holds is upsizing, actually.
Yeah, well, as far as myself, we've had the opportunity to downsize twice. The house that we grew up outside of Pittsburgh, we lived in for 27 years, and it met the growing years for our kids. And again, God created something to place a house right available for us downtown. And then came the transition of moving to the Cincinnati area, where then we had a long search during COVID, which was a very difficult time in which to buy houses. And it was purchasing a house in a suburb here in Cincinnati that is a ranch and is meeting our needs right now. So we've had the opportunity to sort of let go in phases. We're at a great phase right now. And we're also thinking about, is there another move in us down the road? Like what you said, Dale, about senior community living. That's something that we have to kick around and test drive and experiment a little bit on. But I've had the opportunity to downsize, and I know the value of it in looking ahead. So I think we're going to have a great conversation today because our guest today, a friend of the Redirect podcast, is Chris Breitenbach. As a self-employed licensed real estate agent brokered by Comey & Shepherd Realtors, Chris has tons of training and experience and knows a lot about the real estate market. She's been an innovative leader with 22 years of success in managing sales teams, recruiting, and developing sustainable learning solutions. And this is something that could be beneficial to us guys, is that Chris also has a BS degree in psychology.
And that's a Bachelor of Science, not another kind of BS. It's not. She has a legitimate degree.
That is true. She attended the University of Dayton, so she has a psychology aspect of this, too, that I think could be a sort of cool thing. But I just want to say, Chris, welcome to the Redirect podcast.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate being here.
Yeah. Are you taking appointments?
Yeah.
For psychology?
For psychology?
After this?
No.
I'd like to sign up.
There's a couch in the other room. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about your experience as a realtor and what exposure you might have had to some of this downsizing conversation.
Great. That's a good question. So I have been in real estate since 2002, have done a mix of both sales and management. And I love the fact that with a dozen years on the management side, I got exposures to every single transaction in my office. And so really learned about where people are coming and going. I went back into sales about 5 years ago, right during COVID, which I have noticed since I've been back in sales, the majority of my business is either first-time home buyers or people who are transitioning. And probably part of that is where I am at in my life, right? It's my friends and the people who I network with who are considering, what should I do? Or they're going through helping their parents at this point, which is helping them have that long-term plan for what am I going to do so I don't put my children through this.
Now, when you said just a minute ago, it's either first-time home buyers or people transitioning.
Yes.
Define transitioning.
Well,
because it feels big.
Yeah. Transitioning to that right size home.
Okay.
What I'm not seeing a whole lot of is the move-up buyer, right? You were talking about being a move-up buyer.
Potentially.
I'm not seeing a lot of you. And granted, this is my business. It may not be the overall market for every agent, but my business seems to be the people downsizing and the first-time home buyers.
Yeah. Of all real estate transactions done, what you're doing is first time, and is percentage-wise 50%, 80%? How much?
For me? For me personally.
For you personally,
I'm going to say probably 80% of my business is a first-time home buyer or somebody who is downsizing. And the number of conversations I am having is probably focused 90% on those people considering that right sizing is what we call it, considering that right size move.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's very big. I didn't realize it was that.
Wow, we stumbled into a good topic here.
Well, and again, that's not necessarily the market in general. It's my personal business.
Right. Yeah. You have an area of expertise, and people probably gravitate towards you for that particular thing, but it's a real deal.
Right.
So since there are those two things, let's talk about the right sizing aspect of things. What's an obstacle as far as considering that?
Wow. And in my opinion, it is a very overwhelming process. And to me, it depends on the individual person. For some people, there's that emotional aspect. I raised my children in this home. I don't want to give that up. To other people, it's that accumulation of stuff. They look at their house and they think, oh my goodness, I have so much that I need to get rid of, which I believe you're going to cover in a different podcast here.
We're going to do another podcast.
So there is help
about
for
getting
that.
rid of your stuff.
Getting rid of your stuff.
Yeah.
It's also I have to do this whole punch list to get my house ready to sell. And so for some people, it's that overwhelming feeling of the work that needs to be done. For others, it's the scary thought of where do I go? I have a client right now that would like to be in a certain price point, would like a newer ranch, and it's a difficult product to find.
Yeah, especially at this time, these markets, here we are in 2025, and things are tough. The market is hard. So especially if you're coming from a house of substance and you're looking for a house that is right-sized, you're in heavy competition. And you're in competition not only with all of the folks that are looking to downsize, you're in competition potentially for the same house for a first-time home buyer. Is that fair to say?
I think that is fair to say, especially for a number of ranches that I've seen. And I feel bad for the first-time home buyer in that situation, because oftentimes the person who is downsizing has cash because they have equity in their home. And I see it with my first-time home buyers. When we look at a ranch and I see the competition in a ranch and look at the demographic looking at it, I'm very upfront and I say, look, my fear for you is doesn't matter what our offer is going to be. Some sellers out there will always choose cash over a better financed offer. Shouldn't make a difference. But I can't change that psychology thing. I can't change the way a person thinks.
I'm seeing a lot of houses that are going on up in the area that I live that are just enormous. And I know that in different cultures, multi-generational living is prevalent. I don't think it's as prevalent here in the United States. I did talk to my son who lived in Hawaii, and he said It's a huge thing in Hawaii. And I think there's a lot of factors that are associated with that. The cost of buying a house and all these types of things. But are you seeing multi-generational things that parents, when they do downsize, are then moving in with other family members, or other family members are moving in with their parents?
As opposed to downsizing?
Yeah.
That is a good point. I am seeing that, and I'm seeing it at both sides. So I am seeing people go in together. One of my listings last year, the buyers were a father and daughter, who the father was married, the daughter was engaged. Those two are the ones who bought the house together for it to be a multi-generational home.
Interesting.
It was very interesting. But I'm also seeing where there are people who are buying that upsize home looking for the first floor opportunity.
Mother-in-law suite type.
That there could be a mother-in-law suite. So in Mason, we have several homes that'll have an office with a full bath adjacent to it or connected to it. That gives that opportunity for the future for people to plan to bring in that family member. So I see that planning on that side. I see the multi-generational buying together. And I do see the parents who is a little bit older who's buying it. They're buying it so that they could have that first floor space and bringing in a child in their family to live with them.
Quite on the side, I'm gotten involved in affordable housing. But there's, single family homes, and there's massive homes. Mm-hmm. Is there any building on 2-family, 3-family, row house? There seems to be nothing there, where other cities tend to be building like crazy, places where you could have multi-generational, living accommodations. What's going on?
So we are seeing that. Milford's a great example on the hillside near their downtown. Right behind, there's row houses, maybe 4, that are built right into the hill. And it's because there's a small pockets of land that builders are taking advantage of.
They probably got the land cheap.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the new construction are what they called paired patio homes, which I call duplexes.
Yeah.
The thing is that they're sold separately. They're different parcels. So they're not considered a 2-family. They're each considered an individual home. So you would be going in and buying both of them.
2 of them. 2 homes.
You would be going and buying 2 of them. Mm-hmm. Not a bad thought, but you are buying 2 $400,000 to $500,000 homes. So now you're in an $800,000 to $1 million price range.
Guys, this might be a good chance to take a quick break. All right? We'll be right back. Hey there. If you're enjoying this episode, we've got a small favor to ask. Actually, it's a pretty big one. Take a moment to like and share this episode with your friends and family. Then, follow the Redirect podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. It's quick, it's free, and it helps us keep bringing you great content every week. And if you really want to make a difference, drop us a 5-star review. Those reviews will help us spread the word and keep the community growing. So hit that follow button, share it with a friend, and let us know what you think. We really appreciate you guys. Now, let's get back to it.
Buying a 4-bedroom house, Curt, it's interesting that there's a lot of those being built, but the number of families that have 3 kids is falling. Per capita reproduction rate is now officially under 1.
Yeah, but you have a lot more people that are working at home, so they have office scenarios potentially now too.
I totally agree with that. The other aspect of this multi-generational, and maybe I'm not using the right term, I've called it communal living. And I think in an economy where the percentage of income that needs to be devoted towards home finance is completely out of whack to the way it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So, and entering the workforce as a younger family, not having that equally proportional boost in income. So they're making moderate income, sometimes with extreme student debt. Now they've got an out of whack home expense. The way forward, in my opinion, usually an unpopular one, the way forward in that is more communal living. Does anybody have a take on that?
Well, I have a little kick, and this is something that I'm just sort of hearing from other people, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, is that I think the younger generation today, yes, housing costs to buy your first house is a huge
difficult
thing, and it's difficult. All right, you got to have a lot of money up front so you don't have a big payment, all those types of things. But I think younger people are considering more of apartment living or condo living because I don't want to be saddled with yard care. I don't want to be saddled with home maintenance situations. I just want to use it as a living thing because the younger kids, from what I'm seeing from even my middle son who's living in a condo community, he doesn't want to be dealing with all that stuff because they like to use their extra time to go do adventure. And they like to go and do things. So the house is a place where they can live, and they've got room in there in case they have a family. He has an office in there. They got a workout room in the basement. But I'm seeing that what we had in our career, in our life, as far as getting that house and progressing in the house, and then now we tear back down, I don't think that's the cultural norm anymore.
I think it's very individualistic.
All right.
I look at my younger son and his journey. We, a couple years ago, were looking for a condo for him. When we started looking, probably within 6 months, the prices jumped 50 to 100,000. And so therefore it priced him out. We found eventually the perfect condo. Well, at that point, his comment was, I'm passing. I'm going to wait 2 more years. Do you think I can be able to buy a house in the burbs? Because that's where my friends are going. But yet I also see these people who consider Norwood to be too far north because they want to be closer to the action and they want to be with all the development happening.
All right. Well, I want to sort of change gears a little. Okay, go ahead.
Just before you do that, and I want you to apply your psychology, because I do want to go to the people who have emotional connections and attachments to the house. The family knows they need to move. How do you get in the middle of the emotional move of selling the family home?
Great question. It is very hard. And for me, it's identifying who is the one who has the emotional attachment and what is that emotional attachment.
What do you mean by that?
It's not always obvious as to who the emotional person is. Sometimes people make assumptions and there's a decision maker and there's the person feeding the decision. So there used to be when we would put people in our car and we would go out and see 10 homes with buyers. Psychology-wise, I was always told, or I had been told, whoever gets in the front seat is the decision maker. That person may not say a word the entire time, but supposedly they're the decision maker. When somebody's selling their house, sometimes it's a little harder to figure that out. But to me, it's asking questions and making observations. Everybody's going to make their own decisions. And so I tell everybody, hey, I am here to help you and help you evaluate. I am not going to make a decision for you. But if I can figure out who is it who has the emotional connection or the emotional struggle, then I can help them maybe with the right questions and the right things to think about. Personally, I'm a forward-thinking person. I don't hang on to the past. I always am, what is this going to do for me now and in the next 5 years versus I'm holding on to 20 years ago.
Okay. All right. So that's where I was going to change gears. I mean, that emotional thing is huge, and thanks for bringing that up, Dale. Now let's talk the process. There's emotions involved. There's stuff involved. There's family members that are involved. So what is the actual process that you recommend people that are considering downsizing?
I think the first is to be introspective and to look at, what do I want my life to look at? A lot of the people I talk to are on a 5-year process. So I'm in real estate for the long haul. I'm having conversations with people who are doing things now and making considerations now. Great example. I have somebody I'm talking to. They've got a great 4-bedroom house. Both their children are out of state. They are not from Cincinnati. So we have looked at what their options are here, and we've been looking for probably a year, But in the next month, they're going to go see South Carolina, they're going to go to Tennessee, and they're going to go to Florida because they're not tied to Cincinnati. So for them, it's a different process. But we started seeing homes that were patio homes about a year ago. We started having the conversation of, should we finish our basement if we're going to sell within 5 years? Do you think our house is more sellable? We started having those conversations a number of years ago. And so, Adam, you're thinking, oh, I'm going to do this move up next. Well, that's great, but where do you see the progress going? Mm-hmm. And because whatever decision you make today affects those later decisions.
And you made a comment to me about it's a great time to make them when you can make the decision.
Very, very true, right? So one of the considerations is, do you want to be the one making the decision? And if you wait too long, somebody else is making that decision for you. Dale and Curt, you talked about, what would be my next step? Well, you might be in a great situation. At some point, you're not going to be able to make those decisions, and somebody else might make the decision that suits them best, not necessarily what you would have picked.
Okay, here's another follow-up question to that as we get older, and I'm speaking for myself, sometimes there's that prideful factor. I'm going to stay in this house until the day that I die.
Great.
All right? If I can, that's phenomenal. However, things could happen as you outlined. Mentally, I could start to go, I shouldn't be home by myself. Have you had conversations from children in order to help persuade the parent to it's time to move? How does that all work? That communication's got to be huge.
Right.
And I don't think a person like I just described, being a prideful person, is going to come to you and say, no, I'm staying in my house forever. But the kids are saying, no, Dad, you can't stay in the house forever. So
yeah, those are very tough personal family conversations. I don't necessarily get involved in that part of it because that's their family dynamic.
Would you encourage conversation?
Absolutely, I encourage conversation. And, sometimes I'll have a child come to me, a child being an adult, and they're asking me questions about moving their parents. And great, we can get them set up in their house. They can stay in their house forever. We can arrange 24-hour care. But they're even affected by things of once you're released from a hospital, if you're going back to your home, you may have to go to an intermediate facility longer because you're not going to an assisted living. And that's often times that people will come to me and say, oh, we made this decision to keep my parent in their house. And now all of a sudden we're finding they don't spend any time there. And now what do they do? But it's really hard to take that family home away from them because what you're doing is taking away all their familiarity. So there's a real fine line of when people can make that decision.
Yeah, and that's sort of a reactionary thing. And sort of getting back to the process, to be proactive, what are the things you would recommend that people need to consider when they're downsizing?
Great. There's a lot of different lifestyles that people can choose, right? And I have a client recently, they sold their 4-bedroom, 2-story. They bought a house on an acre. They're redoing the house to make it exactly what they want. It did have a laundry on the first floor rather than in the lower level, which is common for the area that they went to. So they made this great decision for that. I have other people looking at what's called a patio home or a condo lifestyle where everything's taken care of for you, right? You don't have to do any outside maintenance. That's a lifestyle that they feel like I could be in here for a long time. But the other factor for them might be that their children don't live in town. And so they're choosing a different lifestyle. Or am I staying in my home until I'm ready to go to a senior community, right? It has an independent living. You live in an apartment and it gives them maybe that camaraderie. So there's so much to think about.
I think about my mom, who's 93, on the south side of Chicago, 2-bedroom condo, part of senior community that has all the levels. And she's busier than I am. But for her lifestyle, she's still active, physically kind of falling apart, but mentally as sharp as could be. Can't see her moving anywhere, but she has the option to go to assisted living. But the key is community. The key is stimulation, people. And I love to bicycle. I want a cycling community. Are people going to, I got to make one, or, hey, here are all the cycling communities?
It could all be three-wheeled.
Could be. Yeah. And probably e-bike.
Tricycles.
E-bike tricycles. But to be honest, I mean, I sit there and think, I want my community to be super active, but I want cyclists around because I want to be in community with cyclists. Is that just me, or is there a trend to that?
I would say it's more of where are the trails that maybe I could be in a cycling club near the bike trail.
Sure.
And building the community on what's already in place. And I see more that you find that area, that you have the proximity, and there's a club for that.
The geographic assets.
Another thing sort of related, and here Dale is talking about going to a place where he can have a community. However, there's also the scenario of your kids. Do you follow your kids? Or what happens when you say, I'm going to retire in Florida, but my family's still in Ohio. And then as I get older in Florida, that makes it harder for the connection there.
Curt, we saw an example of that here on the podcast a few episodes ago. We had Roy Ellsbury. And Roy, who lived close to our area that we're in now, because of his age, wanted his wife to be closer to her children, I believe, which is hour and a half north. And so they sold their house locally. And while they're diving deep into the stuff that they're plugged in for their community and growing the Dayton community for Crossroads, the catalyst or the linchpin for them moving was he knows he doesn't have like 1,000 years left, right? So he's moving his wife closer to her family, which I thought was
Very
really
interesting.
Very insightful.
I think that is a big part of people's decisions. I find that kids seem to be more transient now. Jobs are more transient now. So the fear that several people who I speak with is, I don't necessarily want to move to where my children are at this point because I'm afraid that in 2 years they're moving or 5 years they're moving. And therefore, do I have to reestablish myself every time they move?
I've talked to a number of people that they retired in Florida, and then the kids are up here, and they're very concerned.
Right.
And it's like, hey, you got to come back north. Well, I don't want to come back north.
Right, come south.
You guys move down here. But I guess it just goes back to the situation again that you're not in this alone. You have to talk about it as a family, and you have to create a plan, and it goes back to that process aspect,
and
which
what
you said is 5 years long.
Well, and even if I don't get involved till they're ready to pull the trigger, the conversations need to be had along the way. And part of it is they've gone through it with their parents, and maybe that's the trigger that makes them think, right? Here's what's happened with my personal experience. Maybe I want a different future for my kids. So maybe I don't go to Florida because I've had to deal with an aging parent down there, right? Or maybe I look at a retirement community because I've had to find the staffing 24/7 for a parent in their house. And so I do think that affects those decisions, but I think that's a big trigger for people.
Yeah. You bring up a couple of things as far as the senior community situation. We're going to have another episode that's focused purely on that.
Right.
Because I happened to experience an event the other night and was very impressed. Very, very comfortable, very, very pleasing. You're engaged because the boomer population is that adventuresome individual. And I think that is now being carried over into that senior living situation. And then plus we're going to have somebody come in and talk about your stuff. Right. Which is a whole other conversation and is really huge, super, super huge.
Yes.
Chris, if there was some great advice, just, 3 little bullet points that maybe we talked about here today or something that you want to leave with our listeners, what would that be about the right sizing decision?
I'm going to say first, ask yourself what you want the rest of your life to look like. What really is important to you in terms of lifestyle? and how do you create your own future?
That's beautiful.
Wow.
That's beautiful.
That's awesome.
Great advice.
Yeah. If people want to get in contact with you, how can they do that?
Very easy. My email is chrisb.comey@gmail.com. Anybody can call me, 513-919-7308.
Fantastic. Chris, thank you very much for being with us
Thank
today.
you.
We really appreciate your expertise, and thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Catch you next time on the Redirect Podcast.
We want to thank Gianna Demona and the University of Cincinnati 1819 Innovation Hub for allowing us to use the esports recording studio to record our podcasts. The Redirect Podcast music is from the Sound Gallery by Dimitri Terrace. Want more information on how to redirect your purpose in retirement? Check out the Redirect-U website at redirect-u.com. Do you have something you want to share? Do you have a question about your redirect strategy? Please email us at info@redirect-u.com. We want to hear from you. Check out the latest Redirect Podcast episode, as well as see all of the Redirect episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, remember, there is purpose in your life, so find it and go do something about it.